those housing associations kind of go from a blank piece of paper to a go live system. Over the last 10, 15 years of doing CRM implementations, picked up a few bits and bobs, and I wanted to distill all this information really into some sort of usable kind of information. So I've done a blog which holds a lot more detail, and this is kind of a bit of an overview of that blog, and the link will be in the description once it's live. But the idea is we have kind of 5 key phases to this. The first one is really kind of picking up your strategy, link your CRM system to a strategy or a strategic element. Why do you actually want this system, and what are the kind of metrics around it? So define what they are, really kind of establish what item it relates to from a strategic perspective. So it could be improving customer service, for example. We then want to define our success metrics. So, okay, what are the short, medium and long-term objectives? The short term might be single view of the customer. Medium may be more and more customer processes in there. Long term might be using AI to be more proactive when it comes to customer satisfaction, for example. But they all need to align with your strategic goals that you're trying to achieve. When you've got this information, it's so important. We can then have a little look at putting that into action. So we've got our strategic element, our customer service that we're trying to improve, for example. There's going to be 3 or 4 processes that link to that strategic element. So the idea is then, okay, let's establish what they are. So you may have 5 or 6, and then boil that down to your top 3 that you really want to focus on to get the most bang for your buck. From there, you put those into a short but clear roadmap that you can then let people know about, essentially. Get it out there, start the conversation. But then it may even have a little look and start a conversation around how the development's going to happen. If you're an existing CRM system, it might be just some continuous improvement that will help you meet those objectives, or it could be some wholesale big changes. And there's also different ways you can do it, from the old school dev or low code, no code. Once we have our roadmap, we then want to go and get some buy-in. So we've got our executive engagement, so they'll obviously be very interested in how CRM will link into the strategic element, but also look at different stakeholders. So who else is going to be impacted either indirectly or indirectly or directly, with the actual system you're going to try and implement. Identify those, map them out, and then put together your team. You're going to have a PM. You're going to have a senior manager or project sponsor. They'll come from this group, the exec engagement, and then obviously that links straight back into the strategy, and they'll be used to kind of help drive at a higher level the main implementation, or refresh depending on what you're doing. Then you'll want any sort of current or potential, I've put Dynamics here, but really it can be any CRM system, users, and of course IT. So what we want to be in a position is to give IT as much information as possible so they can go away and build it either themselves or with a supplier. Always worth having a critical friend involved as well. This can be someone who might be sitting outside the main project, but actually could be a good member of staff who's got a good knowledge of the business and can just put a fresh perspective on any challenges you're facing. And a supplier. If you're a small organisation, you'll probably lean on these a lot more than you would potentially if you're a larger organisation with a bit more resource. Either way, this information then needs to be communicated. So put together a plan about who needs to know what and when, and then how, and the frequency. So it might be weekly emails, monthly drop-in sessions, regular team meetings. It's all that information that you can put together. Once we have that, we'll identify our processes, our policies and procedures that link to that strategy. We can then go through and start mapping. We want to map the work. So in the real world, what are the guys doing? Use scenarios, but they need to obviously then identify where you need to comply with different regulatory and compliancy issues. Focus on the customer journey. So it needs to start and end with the customer. And in the middle, what you're able to do is then identify improvements. Might be a bit of automation, there might be alternative channels you can surface the data in to save time and money. But this all happens as part of this process flow. Once you understand how you work, you can go to the next bit, which is really kind of looking at each point in the process, what data do you need to capture for reporting? So this might be compliancy, or it might just be internal requirements that you need to meet. Try and avoid free text when it comes to login information. It can be quite tricky to report on. You can also then define what you want to automate. Are there service level agreements you need to reach? So, for example, your callbacks may need to be within 24 hours, 1 working day, 2 working days. This can all be defined in this part of the process. And then the good idea to then visualize that and put together some mock-ups of the system. That really helps the internal, external teams who are developing the system. This all ties into then to a spec document, which then can be handed over to the devs team and the IT team to work on. But of course, they've been kind of part of the process, so they will have a good idea of where you're coming from. Another key element of this spec is data and the data structure and security. So this is more a technical piece, but what would happen is once you've created your specification, the IT team and supplier can get together and work out what your core table is going to be. So these are the bits of the system they need to build. What migration strategy you're going to need, how much data needs to come across into the new system. Don't assume it should be all the data. It really should be process specific and roadmap specific as well. And what integrated data do you need? So are there certain fields that need to be updated live from your legacy system to your new one? Should it be live? Should it be fortnightly, weekly, daily? It's those sort of conversations you can have. And then security is very important, as you can imagine. Who needs to see what records internally? It can be down to field levels. There might be certain fields certain people aren't able to see because it relates to a sensitive complaint, for example. But all that information, all that detail needs to be logged on your spec. We then move into our development side, where we start looking at the building and engagement. So this is kind of building your environments, putting together show and tell so people can see the system in action, but also having some scope and control around what changes are made, how often they should be changed. You don't want to be just jumping on any change suggestion that's come through from the team or during a show and tell. It needs to be considered, and it really should link back into your strategy and your purpose and your metrics. We then go off into our UAT. So dedicated resource needs to be put into this. This shouldn't be IT checking, excuse me, shouldn't be IT checking their own homework here. We should be getting people on the front line, real users of the system, grabbing test scripts that are scenario based. So they walk through, for example, mutual exchange, they'll walk through from start to end, which we call the happy path, and the customers change house. But it might be a case they get halfway through the process and one of the customers changes their mind. What does that look like? And that's all around scenario-based testing from people who are going to be using the system, not the IT team. They'll do the initial testing to make sure it's technically working, but then it's over to people within the business to get in there and start using and testing and working out what's what. Obviously, everything needs to be logged and checked and retested if needed. We then jump into our pre-launch and go live. So from a pre-launch perspective, I conduct these things called pre-mortems, which are often quite useful. They give everyone, all the key stakeholders, a chance to sort of identify what's the worst thing that could happen if this system went live. The rest of the team then sit there and go, okay, what can we do to either reduce the risk, stop it altogether, or just manage it? And that all leads into the go live actions, which we'll cover in a minute. Another interesting thing around here, though, is to understand the culture of using CRM. So we've all been there, and I particularly was with the customer service side of things. I'd have a big white space on a customer record. I'd be typing away when they're talking to me. I'd copy and paste that, put it into an email, send it to 15 people. Hopefully someone does something, but I'd put something in my calendar to chase them in a week's time. CRM is very different. You need to be understanding who the customer is. We can understand why they contacted us, and we can understand then the next part of the process potentially. This is a very different experience and needs to be put into your training as well. So we have a standard lesson plan, which includes this culture and also real world scenarios. So this is working through how the guys would work in the real world rather than just a standard, can you put that information in that field? Yes, move on. And obviously address learning styles, lots of different ways that people learn. A go live, we're going to be creating our checklist. These are a list of actions. Who's going to need to be who needs to do each action and when it's going to be done, listed and checked off as you go through them. A support team needs to be on hand as well. They need to be quite visible and people need to know who they are, what they can go to them for. But then also identify maybe the different ways to communicate with people. We now have some hybrid workers, people in the office, people at home. I've often sort of just had an open Teams meeting that people can drop into and then drop out when their issues have been sorted. Other people prefer you on site and you're actually walking around and sitting with the guys. So there's no right or wrong way, it's different, but it's key that you understand with the users what they would prefer. Once you've gone live, that's far from the end of the story. So from a dynamics perspective in particular, but again, any CRM system, we need to be picking up any additional changes and then continuing to build on our roadmap. Going live is kind of really just the start of this. And it doesn't have to be big changes. It can be just marginal gains, little small changes, continuous improvements that people kind of sometimes might not even realize, but they just help the system and help that adoption piece. And these items should really address pain points, engage with senior managers and maybe secure resource for next phases and next parts of the project you want to start building. And then obviously leverage low code, no code. I've mentioned that before. But I think all this feeds into your roadmap along with some horizon scanning. So from the product's perspective, what's coming up? Is there any new tech that's going to be there? Is there new functionality you could introduce? But have that all in one place in that single roadmap that you then again communicate and go back through the loop so that everyone's engaged. So that's my short video on the steps I use when either implementing a brand new CRM system or actually just trying to improve the current one.